across in a slide in a second. So Office 365 in a little more detail includes Office Professional Plus, Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Link Online, which is instant messaging. But it's beyond instant messaging because it starts to integrate with your telephone system and your voicemail system. So in Microsoft, when we use this, I don't have a desk phone anymore. Wherever I plug into a network, I get my desk phone comes to me, and it's on my laptop, and a headset or a handset plugs into the laptop, and that's my phone. Voicemails come into that number, and they're routed into my email. So I listen to them or I read them because it's transcribed for me. That's kind of the technology that we're getting to. And the same rich experience I've already talked about. So we think this is kind of the future of productivity, but the really key there is whether you consume this online or whether you consume this as a service on premise, it's pretty much the same service. And the thing that the cloud has allowed us to do, and this is kind of, we have a lot of dialogue with organizations who talk about cost of the desktop, and do we need to manage the desktop, and how do we manage the desktop cost down, and can we deploy desktops at a lower cost because we want more people to consume collaboration or email, into people that perhaps you wouldn't give a laptop to, you wouldn't give a desktop to, but you want actually a very personalized communication experience with them, whether reducing cost by eliminating other business processes. So there's many companies now start to deliver pay slips online and HR information online to all their employees, but if you haven't got access to a desktop, and so we start to deliver things like kiosk worker capabilities through the cloud. That makes it very easy to deliver. It comes in a browser, you get a limited amount of email, it's very low cost, and you can consume that anywhere. But equally, we can't disengage the information worker, people that need really rich experience, and so all those capabilities are there. So we have, now you suddenly have, through cloud, the ability to have differentiated services at different costs. You don't have to put a full price desktop on somebody's desk who only use it 10 minutes a day to check whether they've got their pay slips come in. So this is really kind of important cost-saving features. So I'm going to talk about Windows Azure very briefly. I say you're going to hear a lot more about Azure today. Platforms today. Server, the virtual machine, the network storage, the applications, it just comes as a service through the cloud. And this slide's going to build. When I built it this morning on my laptop, it just built on its own. Here I am clicking. And then, you have to patch. If you're doing this, the platform today, you have to patch it, you have to service release, you have to consider new versions, you have to assemble the thing, you have to customize it. It's often discrete, it's often unique every time you build it. Or your service provider builds it, and you plan for peak load. That's a common theme that we hear across public sector. You build to avoid and recover from failure, because failures are going to happen. Whereas cloud, you've got the applications there. You consume the application. It's maintained for you, ready-made services. It's completely standardized. You don't have to worry about upgrading it. It's on-demand scale. You don't have to go and build a new server or deploy a new virtual machine. The service is built to consume that. And it's built to expect and withstand failure rather than recover from it. So again, we've got the mirroring of the on-premise server products. Again, if you really need to use those, then they're there and they're compatible with the cloud services. And with the Azure platform, I'm just going to let you read that slide. It's far too complicated for me to go through it. But you have a very rich, trying to avoid using the word platform again, but you have a very rich platform on which to construct and deliver your applications you can take for granted. You can focus on what the business process is and how to get the most out of it. And we'll talk about, I'm sure people will talk about Windows Azure App Fabric. And again, what this slide does is illustrate we've got Azure and SQL Azure sat in the cloud. App Fabric allows you to connect Windows Azure applications back to your data or back to other applications back on premise or back with your service provider. Because your whole IT isn't going to disappear overnight into the cloud. You're going to have existing services, you're going to have existing systems to accommodate. So, people come along and say, move everything to the cloud. Well, that's just not economic. It's not economic for most commercial organizations. It's definitely not economic for the government to do that or public sector authorities to do that, spending taxpayers' money. So there needs to be a link back to on-premise and web service applications elsewhere, and we built that into Windows Azure as well. And that's a really important key feature. Just skip over this slide. Get on to more interesting stuff. The other feature I just want to mention briefly on Azure is the openness of the platform. We've put a lot of work into making sure that not just .NET works on Azure, PHP, Java, Eclipse, and Ruby on Rails also work really well with Azure. So you're not constrained to your application development environment either. You can run, you can develop in other languages and methodologies and then deploy that onto Windows Azure. So this is something new that we've been talking about for a couple of months now, but it's actually Azure as an appliance. Because what Azure really is a built-out, ready-to-run, all the software, all the hardware stacked up, ready to rock and roll device in essentially a big container. And we've got partners that are starting to build out that. That's how we build it out. That's how we've made our data centers flexible and economic. You deploy these devices at large scale. We're talking thousands of servers at a time, deployed in a very standardized way. Some really interesting technologies about managing those servers and also processes, changing processes of managing those servers. So instead of, for example, because this is a fabric, this is the platform and all the components in it are interchangeable, then when one of the servers fails or goes bad, we don't touch it. We just move the workloads to another server. And eventually when that container or whatever unit it is we've got has a number of bad servers in it, then it's actually more economic to shut the whole thing down, having moved all the workloads to another identical container, take the container away, and offline you strip it and repair it and do whatever you need. Rather than having engineers running around data centers, swapping disks out and all that, it's just completely unnecessary. It's more cost effective to actually strip and build somewhere else. And so this is kind of the concept we've come to with the Azure platform appliance. You can now have service providers that will take the appliance and they'll be able to deploy Azure services securely as well. And so we're coming through to again, on-premise cloud appliances, which kind of is a bit of a dichotomy or a bit of a odd thing to say. In theory, customers could do this as well. At the moment, one of these things costs several $1 million, so we don't think we're going to get many customers just popping up and saying, I'll have 3, please. But the service providers certainly have jumped in on this service pretty quickly. So it's an Azure service in your data center. That kind of slide explains the benefits there. Physical control, geographic proximity, regulatory compliance and data sovereignty. And those are things that are going to be really important for certain parts of the UK public sector or indeed any other geography's public sector. So we can't get away from the fact that not everything is again going to go into the cloud because you've got security concerns, you've got data sovereignty concerns, and that's an important aspect. And we think we're really well positioned to deliver services to that. And I say our partners have already taken up this appliance technology. So Fujitsu, HP, Dell, and eBay are already buying and deploying Azure appliances. And I thought I'd better show you what one looks like. It's very boring. It's quite interesting to walk through it. Water runs down one side and cools it. But you just kind of plug one of these things in, data comms, power, water, job done. And once all that's in, you manage it remotely. So, talked about services platform, talked about the server platform. If you remember, we talked about software as a service, and I've talked about Office 365, I've talked about platform as a service, I've talked briefly about Azure. Microsoft, we don't run infrastructure as a service to sell to people, but we do still offer products that help support infrastructure as a service, and Hyper-V Cloud is kind of where we're at with that. And that's really, for us, is about either private cloud or cloud built out by other service providers. So you get service providers building out infrastructure as a service. So you've got basically the operating system, you build things onto that. And there's a number of components in that are really important. Identity, virtualization, management, and the self-service portal for managing the virtual machines you're running in that environment. And so all these components, you're familiar with, anybody that's running Windows servers will be familiar with System Center, Windows Server, perhaps not Hyper-V, but that's kind of where the operating system sits now, Hyper-V and Active Directory to provide identity management and integration layer. And then the portal is the new components that we delivered to help manage the virtual machines that run across your infrastructure, pretty much as you would have physical devices. I'm just going to skip over that slide because we're running out of time. So this is the really important stuff for public sector, building it out. So what does all that mean? I've gone through the toolkit, I've gone through the toy box of things, shown you the Lego bricks that we've got, as it were. What does this actually mean for UK public sector? We have a cloud integration approach. If you're going to use on-premise and you're going to use in the cloud services, you need to integrate those. We've got online services, we've got private cloud services, and we've got public cloud services. And then you've got your own customer solutions. So you've got your applications where you've implemented your business logic using one tool or another, or developed that online. And what we see is that the world is kind of splitting into areas where, for public sector in particular, and anybody who understands sort of security terminology, IL on this slide stands for impact level. And the world is splitting into a view which says we can put lower impact levels into public services, and then for higher impact levels or higher security services, we need to actually do something on-premise or with a trusted service provider. And what I've been trying to illustrate in the earlier part of the presentation is that we're pretty well positioned to deliver those components, particularly for public sector, because this is the key point that drives you towards private cloud or on-premise services. And if you have a completely different cloud environment to the ones that you're running on-premise, you're going to have more difficulty in integrating those services together. So we're starting to see our public cloud services becoming extremely attractive for low impact and low threat areas, but our integration capabilities allows public sector bodies to implement with a service provider the secure services and integrate them seamlessly with their cloud service and consumed on public cloud, which dramatically reduce cost. And so, for example, Exchange, it is perfectly possible to have Exchange server on-premise for extremely secure environments, Exchange server provided by a service provider in the UK for sort of medium threats or IL3, IL4 type environments, and then Exchange server in the cloud for IL01 and we think IL2 services